actually serving people by being open with feedback and by addressing feedback. Being really direct and open with feedback is not a natural thing. It's not comfortable for me. I worry about the actual delivery of it. Even if my intent is pure, my intent is to serve them and help them.
May I have your attention, please?
Welcome to Accounting High. It's freshman year at a brand new school. Here, we have no rules in place as we're on a mission to set our own traditions. So hang tight and learn with us as we grow. At Accounting High, you can expect to gain knowledge in a completely different way than what you may be used to, with some fun and oftentimes colorful conversations. Whether you loved high school or you hated it, here's your chance to be a part of an unforgettable experience redone. While you're here, don't forget to follow us on Spotify or subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you may be listening to us right now so you don't miss out on any new episodes. And feel free to leave us a 5-star review letting us know how the school year is treating you. In addition, share this episode on social media, tagging us at Accounting High. So sit back, relax, and open your mind because class is in session.
I repeat, may I have your attention, please?
This is another public service announcement brought to you in part
by Accounting High.
The views and events expressed here are
of the next generation of accounting and tech professionals leading this space.
The events and suggestions are not to be taken lightly. Children should not partake in the listening
of this podcast.
Anything else?
Yeah.
So without further ado, introducing the star of our show,
Scotty and Coach Olsen.
We're gonna have a problem here.
Class is in session. Today we have part 4 of 5 for our PX. This is PX4 creating. This is PX4 competency, creating performance. That's the little subtitle, but performance. What's up, Coach Olsen?
Scotty, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you again. Competency, creating performance. We've got 3 parts already released of this series. Our first one was the curriculum for the People Experience. Second one, we went over the culture, creating culture, and then we talked about coaching and creating leaders. Now we're talking about performance, competency. So tell us a little bit about this episode, Dave.
Yeah, it's all about creating performance throughout the organization. So we talked about creating leaders, and this is about creating performance. And we talked in, I believe it was the first episode, about Nimbl's People Experience, the PX vision. And a really important piece of that vision is that each person knows where their performance stands at all times and experiences the fulfillment of high performance. And I think that second part of that vision is super important. This isn't about pushing for results in the company and maximizing the profit of the company, for example. This is really about recognizing that each of us have a desire to progress and be the best we can be. And by creating performance within the team, that's where the fulfillment comes from. And we have all these other factors in the business, like, there could be cultural aspects like fun or ping pong tables or even compensation and benefits and all that. Those are all great. But if it's not accompanied by the deep fulfillment that comes from progression, it comes from getting better, it comes from knowing that you're making a difference in the vision of some cause, then everything else really falls flat. This is both for the company and for the individual just as much.
Oh, that's huge. And that's really important thing to bring up, because a lot of people do think it's about, like, culture is just the fun stuff, the things we do outside of that. But people need to be fulfilled and feel like they're growing as individuals. And if you can provide that for them, then they're not going to look elsewhere for that too.
Yeah, for sure. In my experience in talking to people would rather feel like they're, and I'm speaking in generally, of course, everybody's going to be a little bit different in how they look at this, but the opportunity to progress and to feel like you're just becoming more whole as a person and moving along is going to be more important than money or a lot of other factors.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start creating performance here. what's the agenda for today, at least I'll go over, is we're going to talk about the competency. We're going to talk about performance agreements, talk about ongoing feedback, performance reviews, training, compensation, salary, benefits, variable pay, and lifestyle. So lots of stuff. This one's action-packed.
Yeah, there's a super lot to talk about in this area. And I think it's important first to just define what really is performance and what does it mean to create a culture of performance. And it can be just as simple as we talked in our last episode about the accountability chart. What is each person accountable to in the roles that they have? And performance is simply being accountable and fulfilling the outcomes that are defined as part of that role. And ideally, those outcomes would be aligned with the overall vision and direction of the business. So really, performance is contributing to the overall direction in the company, as defined by each department, each role.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So let's get into this whole before stage of it, before their employees.
Yeah. So even to be able to perform, you have to know, what does performance look like? What is the standard here? And at Nimbl, we have what we call performance agreements. And basically, it's a combination of it's like a job description or the accountability chart. It's a combination of outlining that, but also the specific metrics that go along with that role. And for someone who's been with the company, more than just beginning, it's where do they currently stand in those metrics? And if they're not living up to what that role is defined as, then we include in that performance agreement a plan for getting them there. So just as an example, in Nimbl, we have a metric for client service people, a multiple of monthly recurring revenue that they handle is one of their metrics for performance. And of course, a new person isn't going to be handling any revenue yet. And it's going to take them, in most cases, a few months to fully get up to that point. So there may be a check-in point where, their agreement is to get to 4 times revenue, and at this point they're only at 2 times revenue. So what is the plan to get them there? Is it, just waiting for sales, or is it learning the business or process, or learning to lead the rest of their team in doing that? So there's a lot of factors that could be contributing to their performance at an important time, and that performance agreement will define, what are the next steps in getting there.
Cool. So that's real important. And then after they get started, or during phase, that ongoing feedback, how do you do that? How do you provide them that feedback? I mean, we talked about on the last episode, one-on-ones, but that was more to create the space. What's the right place, and how do you do that ongoing feedback? Yeah,
so it doesn't do any good to create this performance agreement, this document, then put it on the shelf and don't look at it again. It's got to be ongoing coaching. We talked about coaching last time. Ongoing coaching to that performance agreement and checking in. We use a software system called 15.5, and it allows an automatic reminder to do a weekly check-in. And there's a series of questions that go along with that. It ties in there any rocks or goals that they have, and questions about how they're doing, what they accomplished in the past week, and what they have planned for the coming week. And so that's one way to check in on performance and how they're doing. And then the coach could use the material from that weekly check-in on their next one-on-one and follow up on certain questions or certain things they're getting done or not getting done. And then, like I mentioned, in those one-on-ones, that creates an opening for alignment around the business and their role, check in on how people are doing and how the role is fitting into their life goals and how they're feeling about their team and their capacity and anything else that may go into that. And then it'd also be checking in on this performance agreement. So if there's, I didn't mention this before, as part of the performance agreement, there's an agreement that they will strive to live the core virtues, not necessarily to perfection, but that they'll be striving to live those, and that they'll be open to any feedback or to work on any deficiencies that are there.
So that's an accountability factor. It's also psychological. When somebody signs something or commits to something, that they're going to hold themselves accountable to that, and it's very effective. I mean, I'm sure it is. We haven't done that, but it sounds awesome. I love this.
Yeah, the psychological part of it is the co-creation of it. It's not that, I think job descriptions can sometimes be, that's a good starting point. But, you bring someone into a role and say, this is your job and here's your metrics, then it can seem like a one-way thing. But this agreement, it's a two-way thing. It's coming together on, here's the role, here are the metrics, and like, what contribution do you have to this? And what do you agree to this, or what do you see we need to modify, things like that. It's a conversation rather than just being dictated to.
Yeah, that's dope.
And then that would be the ideal for the ongoing feedback as well, is that conversation. What's working, what's not working, what's contributing, if there's lack of performance in some way, what's contributing to that, what kind of roadblocks can I help with as a coach?
Well, everybody's empowered in this structure, and then the way that you've set this up, you've empowered everybody to have a voice in their own career paths and their own outcomes. They can choose a lot of, they dictate how well it goes, and they're part of this, and then they take ownership in it, and you're gonna get more out of them. I just read a book recently, Multipliers, by Liz Wiseman, and she talks about leaders that create multipliers. The difference between a multiplier and a diminisher is they get more out of their people. A multiplier can get, somebody will give more than they even have to give because they end up growing as a person too and bringing that to the table because they have a say at the table. A diminisher is somebody who's told what they're going to do. In a lot of cases, what they're getting is maybe 50% of that person at work. They're not giving it their all. They're just giving it what they have to do to get by. And what you're doing is creating a situation where people want to grow as a person, and you're not getting 2 times as much out of them versus a diminisher, but you're getting more because they're becoming better and they're growing as a person as they work for you. Awesome.
It goes back to that two-way street we talked about in the beginning, that it's not just about, getting the most out of performance so the company can maximize their profits. It's about, creating that person and their fulfillment from that progression. And that's really why the ongoing feedback, the ongoing check-ins, the one-on-ones should be a two-way conversation always. What's the performance towards the direction of the company, and how is the company fulfilling on that person's need to grow or to integrate with other areas of their lives?
Yeah. Kenji and Matthew talked about a book that they read by Kim Scott, Radical Candor. They talked about that a lot. It was very impactful for them at Acuity. And you've got that listed here as part of that. Tell me about that book.
Yeah, this is a profound book, I think, and it's not something we've intentionally, read across the team and specifically implemented, but it's been helpful for me to think about actually serving people by being open with feedback and by addressing feedback. And that's, for me as a leader, that's definitely, I've heard Kenji and Matthew talk about this as well. I think I'm similar to them in that being really direct and open with feedback is not a natural thing. It's not comfortable for me. I worry about the actual delivery of it. Even if my intent is pure, my intent is to serve them and help them and move everybody forward. I worry about how that delivery is going to come across, and it's going to be effective or offensive or what that might be. So that book was helpful for me in thinking through not just the idea of serving people through feedback, but some of the how-tos of how to go about that. But that's, so true. Ultimately, by being willing to provide feedback, you're serving the person in their lives and you're serving the business.
Yeah. So Radical Candor. Be a kick-ass boss without you losing your humanity. That's the subtitle.
Yeah.
Without losing your humanity. I love that. So let's talk about reviewing this performance and how you do that. We're not talking about going once a year and just giving a performance review here.
Yeah, so there's two ways to look at performance reviews. One is that the ongoing feedback, the one-on-ones weekly, should be a mini performance review. Not that we have to specifically open that performance discussion every week, but there should be an opening to address being complimentary about great performance and also addressing lack of performance. And we still do formal performance reviews at Nimbl. We do those twice a year. And it's almost like a check and balance, where we train our team and we hope that each of those weekly one-on-ones is effective and they're not just devolving into the tactical, but it's human nature and nature of an organization, that not everything happens perfectly throughout the organization. So that performance review is kind of a check and balance to make sure that at least twice a year, and again, hopefully much more than that, but at least twice a year, we're forcing the conversation. We're forcing everybody to step back and look at performance, review those performance agreements. So the key input to those performance reviews are the performance agreement. Check in against those, see how that's going, see if any updates need to be made. And that's typically part of that performance review every 6 months, is to sign off on either that the performance review is still valid or that it's been updated based on current circumstances. And an example could be, like I talked about before, if someone's not at their metric of how much revenue they're handling, we define a path of how we're going to get there. So 6 months later, if they haven't done it earlier, we check in and how's that going? Where are we at with our metrics, and are we there? And if not, what adjustments do we need to make? It's that formal check-in. And I mentioned 15.5 is a tool for those weekly check-ins, and it also has a built-in performance review cycle that keeps everything in the same place.
That sounds awesome. I know Nicole McKenzie, our original coach, still Coach Mac. She uses 15.5. She's been talking about that for a while. That's been very instrumental. So yeah,
it's really helpful. And those performance reviews check in. Like there's three, and I didn't mention this as part of describing the performance agreement, but there's really three main sections to that. One is the job description or the accountability chart. What are the areas of accountability? The second is the metrics, and the third is core virtues alignment. And the format of that performance review is to check in on all three of those areas.
That's dope. Yeah. So then how do we train our people? What do we do? How do we do that?
Yeah, this is a big focus for us right now. We have not had very intensive formal training throughout Nimbl. It's been more apprenticeship style, where someone will come on and they'll work with their coach or a teammate to learn the ropes, and they'll read documentation and follow the process and that kind of thing. So we're realizing how critical, and I feel like we're behind the 8-ball here, but we're working to catch up, is actually putting formal training in place. We do have already, for quite a while, we've had an onboarding process where we go through, new employees will go through different checklists of getting up to speed on systems, and we have documentation on how those systems work and how we operate within Nimbl in those systems.
That's more orientation. It's not necessarily training.
Yeah, for sure. So it's the beginnings of a training, but it's not what I would consider ongoing training. So we're intentionally beginning to create formal training for each level or each role in our organization. And so I talked about the original onboarding. I think, and I can't remember exactly where I heard this. I think I may have got it from GitLab. GitLab is kind of a well-known remote company, and they have a public handbook, and they have a lot of best practices for operating a remote team. And I'm pretty sure it's them that they have a concept called reboarding. They have the onboarding process to bring on a new employee, and then they have their team regularly go through a reboarding process. So it's as if they're a new employee. They're checking in on all the orientation and making sure everybody's on the same page regularly, and not just kind of coming on board and then being left to fend for themselves from there.
Cool. Yeah, I like that reboarding, because it's always an ongoing, constant process, and sometimes people need a refresher.
Yeah. So we have in the works what we call the Nimbl course, that each of our team can take. We intend to have it every year, just going through all the core virtues and all the key kind of foundational elements of working at Nimbl, who we are and how we work. And then that would be a kind of the foundation for everyone to be on the same page. And then we'd have role-specific training. And
are you using any platforms for that? Any tools?
Yeah, there's lots of training tools out there. We did, a few months ago, we went through a search and looked at our needs, and we settled on Learning 360. And the way we intend to use that primarily is as a way to organize the documentation we have in place. And so we have what we call the SSOT, the single source of truth. And that's where we intentionally document all of our processes, our client processes, and any internal processes or cross-departmental, anything we're working on. We want to have a single source of truth to go to know how we operate. And we're in the we've had documentation as a part of our culture throughout the whole time at Nimbl, but we're going through a process of reorganizing and relooking at how we do that. And so what the training would be and Learning 360 would be, instead of recreating all the documentation within training, it would be more of an organized way to point people to different areas. So the training module, maybe go to this link and read this documentation, and then some exercises or quizzes to test knowledge through that system.
Dope. Cool. All right, let's talk about paying people. That's always a big topic. I think everybody's got their own compensation philosophy. How do you guys handle it?
Yeah, this is an area that I love to keep learning about, because I by no means think that we've have it figured out. I think it's what I've heard of as just a hygiene factor. It's not something that's going to make or break people if you have it just right. Like, and I can't remember where I've heard this either, but basically, people aren't going to be typically ecstatic about their compensation. It's just kind of is there and needs to be fair and needs to be reasonable. It's the other factors like the progression, the career growth and performance and all that really, and the vision that really keep people. But you still need to get compensation right.
Yeah, and then compensation becomes more or less an afterthought once you have all of those other things in place. But in the beginning, most people are going into a job thinking about, what am I going to get paid? And that's usually their top of, typically they go into their job search processes. I have this salary in mind. Once you get beyond that, and once you have that taken care of, then it's all of those other factors. That's what keeps people, but also that's what attracts people in some cases too. Yeah. But figuring out that salary and that fair compensation, not getting too excessive about it too, because sometimes people just throw money at the problem, pay somebody way too much than they should. So tell me how you guys go about figuring out that happy middle.
Yeah. So there's lots of different ways to look at salary, for example. So we talk about salary or base compensation. What's that starting point? And in the accounting industry, we have we can't have fairly defined roles and levels based on role and experience. So there's salary studies out there. There's different ways to research market salaries. You can look at job postings, and a lot of job postings will post either the salary or a range of salaries. So we do those kind of exercises to make sure that we're keeping a pulse on what's out there. And we also get feedback from our team too. They look at, for example, a new candidate comes in the hiring process. We'll gather feedback from them of what are they seeing in similar roles in the industry, or our current team members may be hearing what's out there and provide feedback there. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of hone in on that. And I don't find that necessarily an easy process. There's no right answer for a lot of roles, but it's, for us, it's doing our best to keep on top of what's going out there in the industry.
How transparent are you on compensation among the team?
So what we do is we have, within our career paths that I mentioned before, we have a range of compensation that is defined by each level. So, for example, client manager 1, client manager 2, client manager 3, we have a defined range for that role, and we're pretty consistent on everybody within that same job title is in that range. So we're transparent in that way. We're not transparent as far as each individual person and letting everybody know what everybody else makes, but it is within those bands.
Mm-hmm. So they have a rough idea of it. Cool. What are those bands? Do you know that? Do you have that in mind?
Yeah, you're testing me. I don't remember off the top of my head. I believe we're roughly, I'm going to give rough numbers. I'm not going to be exact on this, but
okay.
Our entry level, and when I say entry level with our client manager, we do hire more experienced people on our U.S. team, because we have our Philippines team fulfills those entry level bookkeeping type jobs. So typically client manager 1 would have at least 2 or 3 years of experience, and that's going to be about 55 to 65,000 a year. And then CM2 is about 65 to 75, and CM3 is 65 to, I think I'm a little bit high on that. Maybe it's 50 to 60, 60 to 70, 70 to 80, somewhere around that range.
Fair. Cool. All right. Now let's get into salaries, though. Like how you handle that, or what you're using there.
Yeah, so there's one thing to set the salary when you first hire someone, but then it's the ongoing reviews of what does it look like for those adjustments. And ideally, we would do that on the schedule, like the performance review schedule, and it would align with the definition of their level. So someone, we have a pretty clear definition of what's involved in the client manager 1 responsibility. And when someone has graduated from that and moving up to be promoted to a CM2, then that's a natural time to adjust their salary to be within that range. We also have defined, too, to provide some more guidance. Within those levels, we have sub-levels. So we have CM1A, CM1B, and CM1-3. And so those A, B, and C levels would determine roughly where they fit within that range. So, 1A is pretty new and they're learning the process and they require a lot of support. And as they progress up through C, they're just about ready to move on to the CM2 responsibilities. So that provides some structure around those salary increases. We try not to do just arbitrary salary increases that aren't tied to that specific performance and specific job role.
Yeah. So how do you handle benefits, and what do you guys do for benefits?
Yeah, so just this year in 2023, we put in place a group health plan, and we went through a broker to shop the different options. I've been resistant to the idea of group health given the size of our team and the cost involved, but it became such an important factor as we recruited that our current team didn't really push a lot. They were pretty satisfied with what we had in place, but it became more of an issue of recruiting new people, and we were losing some people because of that, not having group health in place. What we had before that, which is a good option that I really recommend and worked well for us for quite a while, it's called QSERA, and the acronym is QSHERA, and it's a program that allows companies to reimburse tax-free for health premiums and certain healthcare costs. So we basically set a range for, you can break it down in different categories such as, single, married with children, and you can have a set amount that you'd reimburse for their private healthcare premiums and their out-of-pocket healthcare expenses. And to me, I thought that was a good bridge to get us to the actually providing group health.
Yeah. I skipped that. I skipped that step because it didn't exist when I first did our health plan. We didn't have that many people when we started a health plan for the team. Fortunately for us, we were grandfathered into the new type of health plan that you have to have. This was grandfathered in for a long time, and now we just had to go into the new types of health plan, and our premiums went up like 200%. It was crazy. I'm paying like 2 or 3 times more than I was before with this, and it's a worse plan too. Everything changed. I want to go backwards and go to that QSERA now. Our team likes the health insurance. That's a big deal now, and it's the existing team. So can't do anything about it once you've been given it for a while.
Yeah, and it worked out well, almost by luck. We had a certain amount we were reimbursing under QSERA, and we were able to find a quote, which really surprised me, that was pretty close to what we already were paying. So it wasn't a huge jump to be able to provide the full health plan.
Dope. Yeah. Well, it's not cheap, that's for sure. And I always thought health was like the top one, but I just did an episode with Gusto about the economy explained, and they said that 401ks are very, very effective. They've been around forever, but offering that seems to be another sticky benefit for employees. Their reason was because you can't get them anywhere else. Like health, you could hop onto a spouse's plan if their company offers it, but you can't do that with a 401k.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we do offer a 401k as well through Gusto. Gusto makes it easy through Guideline, but it's very popular with our team.
Yeah. So you got 401k, you got that. Yeah.
Yeah. And one reason I avoided group plans for a while is, it's just my own personal opinion about group health, is I feel like they're inherently unfair because not everybody, because they're pretty expensive for people who take advantage of it, but there are some people who don't need it. They may be on a health plan or their spouse's plan, or if they're younger, their parents' plan. And so not everybody gets the same benefit across the board. And that bothers me a little bit, but it's the environment that we have to operate in. So
yeah, no, I feel you. I understand. Well, that's a whole nother conversation, a whole nother episode if we're going to talk about health insurance. And I don't want to get into that now. We just have to renew ours. And It was another big jump every year. It's always something. So let's talk about some of the variables.
Yeah, so variable pay. This is something that's been really important to me from the beginning, is having the team share in the success of what they're building. But even though it was important to me, I really took a long time to put something in place. And actually, we just put a variable pay program this year for the first time. And one of the reasons it was hard for me is because it's can be inherently difficult to design a plan that is fair, that really helps people share or allows people to share directly in what they're creating in a way that doesn't create unintended consequences or gaming or things like that. And so I went through so many iterations of ideas and discussions with our leadership team, and 5 years of that. And it took us that long to actually just come across a system that we're happy with. So I can describe what we do there, but that's kind of the background. Is it can be difficult to put a plan in place that doesn't cause that has the outcome that you're intending and doesn't cause other issues, and that also isn't a huge amount of overhead to manage. If you have different people under different programs, then you're negotiating each person's program, and there may be unfairness or differences between those plans, and just becomes a lot to manage. So what we discovered, actually someone on our leadership team was familiar with the book called Great Game of Business. And in the Great Game of Business, they talk about a system called stake in the outcome. And I don't know if you've heard of that or if we've talked about that, Scott. But
I don't know if we have, no.
Yeah. But essentially, there's a lot to it, so too much to share in this episode, but I recommend going out and looking at that book. And it's basically creating a even playing field for the entire team, where it's like a sports team, where if the whole team wins, everybody wins. There's no, or very few individual differences. And there's going to be differences, of course, that we've already talked about in, for example, salary. Salaries are going to be differentiated based on someone's role and experience and their performance. But as far as a bonus program, a variable pay program, everybody's on the same program. And there's key metrics that you define of what really drives the business. And then you define a payout based on a payout as a percentage of everyone's salary based on where the company performs in a certain period. And so in the book, they use the example of a manufacturing company, and they have a yearly cycle of what it means to perform in the company. And then they do an annual bonus or they do a quarterly bonus that's scaled for an annual outcome. So if I remember correctly, I think they do 10% of what's projected in the first quarter, and then they scale it up to get to 100% of the bonus by the end of the year, and they adjust each quarter based on how it's actually going. Because we're not in a manufacturing environment, we're more of a recurring revenue subscription environment. We do that quarterly. So our two key metrics are MRR growth and gross margin. And so we have a matrix of MRR growth and gross margin that we look at each quarter. And based on that matrix, we give a payout of a percentage of everyone's salary for that. So, we're just getting started, and we have some building to do to get into a high enough gross margin that we can really have a decent payout. But with our Q1 of 2023, we had a 2% payout. So everybody got a payout of 2% of their quarterly salary based on those metrics. And we would like to scale that up, fairly soon, within reason. We would like to get that more between 5 and 10%. So
that's dope. Yeah. Everybody does all kinds of things with bonus. It's always so complicated with us accounting firms. I don't know why. There's always some complex calculations, and at the end of the day, it's all about the team understanding that too, is what I found. Every time we did something, if they didn't understand it, it wasn't as impactful. They didn't understand how they could get it, or they could see how they could impact that and what they could do to impact their bonus. A lot of times they just didn't really care as much.
Yeah, as we pulled our team, especially, a lot of our leadership team, for example, they've come from other companies, and a lot of them came from bonus programs. And that was pretty common feedback. It's like, yeah, I got a bonus every year, but I have no idea how it was. Like, I don't know what I did to earn it, really. And so, and if you have a bonus like that, then it just becomes part of salary. You might as well call it salary, because it's just part of what people earn. So we wanted to create something different than that.
That's dope. Yeah. All right. So let's get into lifestyle.
Yeah, so this comes back to our career plans and understanding. I think we talked about this in our last episode of our understanding people's desires for their lives and the lifestyle they want to live and matching that to the needs of the company. And so there's specific mechanisms that we can use, like PTO, for example. There's a big debate on PTO and how to handle that, especially with remote companies. And, unlimited PTO is all the rage. And there's a lot of complaints about, well, you say unlimited PTO, but what that really means is I don't take PTO because I don't know what I can take. And so what we do is we do say unlimited PTO, but we also say minimum of 3 weeks is the guideline.
Minimum, they have to take 3 weeks.
Yeah, they have to take 3 weeks. So we don't track it closely. We're not accruing it for salary people, but we do want coaches to be monitoring and people to make sure that they do take that through at least that 3 weeks. And what that looks like in practice, or at least what we train and encourage the team on, is 3 weeks of time where you can unplug and get away. And what that looks like is really dependent on the person. Some people like to completely unplug and check out and get that refresh and then come back. Some people would prefer actually to keep in touch and maybe clear out messages along the way so they're not coming back to a full inbox. Or they may take, 6 weeks, but all 6 weeks you're still keeping in touch and working part of the time. So we really want to leave that flexible to what works for people and not, saying you absolutely have to unplug, but you definitely have permission to if that's what you want to do.
That's cool. I've experimented with forcing people to do unplug days where we would have unplug day every quarter and I would collect everybody's phones, completely unplug for the whole day. And it was some fun stories of doing that. Some people didn't like it. And then at some point we just said, okay, you can opt out, but you have to work. If we're all unplugging, you got to work that day. And we don't even do it anymore, but it was fun. Like we would go out. I bought disposable camera just so we could take pictures and stuff because we didn't even have phones. Sometimes people would get lost because we were driving some people didn't have navigators or they didn't know where we were going. It was interesting, but it was just the whole experience of being together without being plugged in too. That was what we were trying to replicate. This was when we were all in person too. But
Right.
Just unplugging in general is hard for some people, but it can also be very liberating.
For sure. Yeah, so I think that's sufficient for now to cover lifestyle, but really the principle is let's understand what people want out of their lives, match that to business needs and performance, and provide that environment for the team.
Yeah. So as you can see, performance isn't just a once a year thing that you do and you review and you just think about it abstractly. This is practically everything that goes into just a performance, from creating the agreement, some kind of agreement between the team, the ongoing feedback of that performance, the reviews and how they're conducted, the training, compensation and salary and keeping up with that, benefits, variable pay, and lifestyle. So all the components of it we discussed. Anything in summary? Anything you want to leave with our listeners?
No, I think you recapped it well. That covers it. But I guess the one recap I want to make sure that we remember is that performance is not just for the benefit of the company. It is for the fulfillment and the growth of each individual team member. And so we're really creating leaders. We're creating people by demonstrating and defining performance.
So, all right. Class dismissed.